All of these financial things, I think, you can overcomplicate them, but really, if you're in doubt, stick to your fundamentals, simplify it. And if they don't make sense, then be willing to walk away.
Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Vichaar Manthan podcast. I want to give a massive thank you to all of our listeners who heard episode 1 on exploring Dharma. If you have not heard that yet, please go and check our social media. Check your favorite podcast platform. Do engage. Let us know what you think. Very proud today to bring about episode 2. Very special guest, Ravi Lakhani. Ravi, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Sumit.
Brilliant. For those that don't know, Ravi Lakhani, a couple of years younger than me. I see him like a little brother. We do have the odd jest. You first started studying medicine, and I say first because you no longer are. What happened there?
Yes, indeed. I studied 4 years of medicine, decided it wasn't for me. I left, ended up in the finance industry. That's where I could see myself, and then spent a few years in mortgages and in the property industry. And now I'm, happy in the working in private equity.
Brilliant. So swap the stethoscope for the calculator.
Exactly.
Brilliant. So Ravi works in the healthcare and real estate and is at a private equity firm as a senior analyst. Ravi, what does a senior analyst do? Isn't that just a fancy title?
These are all fancy titles. In a nutshell, what I do is I look at businesses, value them, help my fund decide if we're going to buy them, and if so, at sort of what price. And then with a speciality in sort of scaling up, consolidating established businesses and then growing them. And yeah, that's the sort of specialty. And at the moment, we're looking at mainly healthcare, and we're building up a real estate portfolio on the side as well.
Okay. So if I was a young budding entrepreneur and I wanted your help in buying a business, what type of things are you looking at? What you said you analyze businesses. What does that mean?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, I'd look at you. What's your history? What are you looking at buying? Why are you looking at buying it? All these simple seeming questions, but it's really these fundamentals where a lot of these decisions are messed up or missed. So it sounds simple, but that's where I'd start. And then we'd look at wider factors, the market, what's normal value, what businesses are you looking at, why are you looking at them? And then there's sort of various methods for working out how much we would pay for them, what we'd value them at. What's really interesting in this is something called retrograde analysis, and it's an idea we use a lot. And it's basically, where is your end? What are you going to do at the end in 3 years, 5 years? Is it that you want to keep them? Is it that you want to sell them? And we work from there and say, okay, if you want to sell them, let's work backwards. If we want to sell them in 5 years for X amount, what can we afford to pay for them now?
Would you call that an exit strategy? Is that another term for that?
Precisely, absolutely, an exit strategy.
You got to kind of know what you want to do at the end before you. And do you think that applies to all of wealth? You need to know what you're trying to do with wealth.
Pretty much. I mean, we know the nature of the world is that it changes, and you have to be adaptable and able to think on your feet. Having said that, anytime you go into a situation, you really want to have some sort of exit strategy. That's for two reasons. One is, otherwise, what are you doing there? It just helps to clarify your intention of why you're there, and helps the decision-making process. If I know in 5 years I want to sell something, let's take a simple example. You buy a car. In 5 years, you want to sell it. Well, you're going to keep it as clean, as tidy as possible. You're going to avoid getting scratches on it. You're going to look after it. You might minimize mileage. Whereas in 5 years, if you decide, I want to use this car for traveling up and down the country, you're going to whack mileage on it. You may not look after it too much. It doesn't matter. It's going to go to scrap anyway. It sounds simple, but knowing what you're going to use it for and what its end purpose is helps you make those little decisions along the journey.
So someone coming out of uni, perhaps, what kind of things should they be thinking about when it comes to wealth?
Yeah, so I think simple things, really simple things, and things like, how much am I going to be making in terms of salary? It doesn't mean you go for the highest paying job, but it's good to have an accurate idea of what you are going to be making. And generally, I mean, I'm still young, I'm still on this journey, but the advice that I've been given by others who are further ahead is really that at this stage when you're young, it's not about how much money is coming in, although that is important. It's about sort of growing and learning and understanding both yourself and the environment, the industry, the principles. Because 10 years later, when you're a millionaire and you mess up and you lose £500,000, that's a far more expensive mistake than spending 6 months, in the trenches, really learning the nitty gritty and making the right decisions later on down the line. So it's really about sort of investing in yourself and growing and learning and having the patience to build that character that you need.
And stay away from all those get rich quick schemes. They don't pay off.
Absolutely.
Those forex
Yeah.
traders on Instagram. I saw actually there was someone on Instagram. Obviously, they used pictures of a very pretty girl, trying to lure people in. Like, yeah, invest with me. I make so much. And I thought, let me see where this goes. Let's send them a message to see. I'm like, yeah, I'm interested. I want to invest £500. And then they gave me a bank, a foreign bank, to transfer money into. I was like, nah, this is not happening. I'm buying my money with an Instagram influencer.
Yeah. The question here is, look, if they're so good, and I know people that are good at this and they make money, none of them are on Instagram
Yeah,
because they don't need to be. They're making enough money.
is that
So why is that person on
that's a
Instagram?
good Jay-Z lyric that comes to mind
Yeah.
here. Something like, I see them holding money to their ear. There's a disconnect. We don't call our money over here. Why is wealth and dharmic wealth important to Ravi Lakhani?
Well, I mean, this goes back to when I was studying in medicine. And why does anybody get into medicine? And the genuine answer generally is to help people, to make a difference, to save lives is the sort of common thing that you hear. And one thing I realized for myself personally is that this is not my version of helping people. And again, I did this sort of simple maths calculation. Let's say you're a surgeon and you do 20 eye saving surgeries a day, and you work 300 days a year, and you spend 10 years of your life doing it, right? So 300 times 10, 3,000 times 10 years of your life, that's 30,000 eyes that you saved. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
awesome.
Amazing. No doubt you've impacted many, 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 many people's lives. Now, the thing is let's say you're Bill Gates, you can fund 300 hospitals that each carry out 30,000 operations per day. And then you can put 10 surgeons in each one, and you can whack that up to 300,000, and you could do this in 10 different countries and be at 3 million.
So it's sort of exponential there. It's, instead of being one person, can you empower 10, 15, 100 other people to do the same?
Absolutely. And even simpler, and this is something I think we miss, is let's say that one surgeon is doing 30,000 because they're doing 10 a day. And they're doing 10 a day because it takes them an hour to do it. Now, let's say you're in finance and you figure out a way of making that more efficient and it becomes half an hour. It's not just that surgeon who's now doing an extra 30,000, it's every other surgeon on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's really these ideas, the simple maths, that I thought, do you know what? This is the way I think, this is the way I'm inclined. And I have a huge amount of respect for those who can be in medicine and do it, because I certainly can't. I mean, I demonstrated that. I left.
That's amicable, really. I mean, you definitely had a motive to go in, but I think you had a stronger motive to get out, and it seems like you're doing a world of good on the other
Absolutely.
side.
Yeah.
So props to you. Let's see how many eyes you can impact. But right now, we're trying to impact your ears. This is the VM podcast. Please tune in. Please subscribe. Please like. Please share. And let us know what kind of questions you have for our guest. Today, we're discussing dharmic wealth with Ravi Lakhani. So let's get some of the basics out of the way. What is wealth? How would you define it?
Wealth, I mean, personally to me, is, if we're talking about it in monetary terms, it's that surplus. Once you've dealt with having shelter, having food, your basic necessities, it's the surplus you have on the side that we can really call wealth, right? So it's the stuff you have the freedom to invest or buy things or whatever you want to do with it. That to me really is the crux of
So
what
you're
wealth
sort of
is.
taking care of your basic human needs. It's what you do with the rest of your money. So something like a phone bill, is that something you choose to do with? I remember actually your phone, you disabled all your apps. You just had like just the basic what you needed on that.
Absolutely. To create a surplus of time.
Is wealth money, or is that too broad a definition?
I mean, when we're talking about it in the financial sense, very much, you can use the terms interchangeably: money, wealth, bonds, credits, any form of money that we talk about, you could class as part of my wealth. I mean, a really simple way of thinking about it in financial terms is everything that I own, everything that's my property, so my assets, minus everything that I owe to somebody else, right? So my liabilities. And that sort of net balance, for now, let's call that wealth.
Was money always around? When did money first start happening in the world?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I'd defer to a historian, but I've looked at this a fair amount. It's something that interests me. And one thing I found really interesting is that, we're kind of taught this narrative in schools that there was bartering and you would exchange a chicken for 3 cows or whatever it is. And that's how it worked. And that's true to some degree. But really, that's not representative of the reality at all. And what would happen is that there'd be a village, and let's say I want to exchange with Sumit. Sumit is a chicken farmer, and I need 3 eggs. Well, I would go to Sumit and say, I want 3 eggs, and Sumit would give it to me. And he wouldn't take anything in return. However, he would just give me 3 eggs because I need 3 eggs to feed, my wife and kids today. I don't have any, but, you know. Now, this is because in the village, everybody knows each other. So next week, when Sumit comes and he comes to my, I don't know, blacksmith factory, and Sumit says, hey, I need a sword, you know, I would give him that sword. And that would be counted as I've paid off his 3 eggs plus a bit extra,
Sort of like IOUs kind of floating around.
Exactly. So what's odd is it seems like credit
Mm,
and lending almost came before money,
yeah,
right? Which was, I found surreal when I found that out, because in school it's so often, there was a bartering system. No, everybody knew each other. The credit almost came before money.
that's very interesting. But it also that we hear of history being quite barbaric. So if you didn't give me that sword for whatever reason, you might not have had the metals or whatever the equipment ready to then make me a sword. Would I just kill you on the spot? You owe me, or it would be some type of rapport between people and a mutual understanding.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the cultures and how they dealt with this. So quite often villages would have festivals. So once a year, everybody sits around a fire, and I say Sumit owes me because I borrowed 3 eggs and I gave him a sword. And somebody else would say, yeah, but Ravi, you owe me because I gave you a thatched roof and you gave me one bale of hay or some cart, and it would go around, and then you'd cancel out everything that cancels out, and there'd be 5 or 6 people that owe each other, and you pay it at the end, and it's done. That's your year done,
Yeah.
right? It's all sort of community thing.
It sounds quite. I mean, that couldn't exist today, could it? Yeah. Go to Apple. I'd like an iPhone, please. You can come and get a couple of eggs off me later. Imagine that.
So now we've systematized it. But what's great about the system is now I can do that with somebody who's halfway around the world. Can I borrow £500,000? Yes. Here's a piece of paper saying you owe me £500,000. So that trust, that community that was built, let's say, in a very intimate village, you could argue that what we've done with that is we've managed to systematize it and spread it to anybody. I can borrow money off people I don't know.
Yeah, you get crowdfunding and all sorts these days. There's lots of systems out there, cryptocurrency and all that, which I'm sure we'll touch on in just a moment. Okay, so this fairy tale story of swapping chickens for eggs and swords and things, call it a fairy tale. Where does gold come into that? Because I hear this notion and story of trading with gold. I've got one gold coin. For that, I will exchange something with you. Is gold important to the history or to the understanding of money and therefore wealth?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's fascinating about this story and this narrative is that the invention of gold and gold coinage is intertwined with the history of war and
Wow.
armies.
Okay.
And very simply, let's look at why. So I'm in my village, you know me, therefore I can borrow 3 eggs. Now, you and I go off to war in Greece or Spain. Those villagers don't know us. Plus, we just killed half their army.
Mm,
They're not going to sell us eggs. How do you feed an army? Well, you feed them because our emperor, right, he decides to print gold coins for his soldiers. And now his soldiers can go to any country and they can buy services, they can buy food, supplies, weapons. And so the history of gold coinage is tied with invasions and armies and so on.
So that's why they say money is the root of all evil.
That's possibly, I don't know who says that anymore.
True. I think,
But
and that's an interesting thought, though. Money being the root of all evil is there. At least I feel like there's always a negative connotation when it comes to wealth, or at least having more wealth than the other. Perhaps if you look at super high net worth individuals, sometimes, at least in some arenas of society, it's seen as a bad thing. Do you agree?
I almost completely disagree. And the reason is simple. I think, first of all, these ideas, as with most ideas that are so extreme and mildly hateful, is they stem from misunderstanding or a lack of understanding. And the second is the sort of fundamental premises and ideas at which we're coming from this. So you just said money is the root of all evil. And yet in sort of classical Hindu texts like the Artha Shastra, it says money is the root of dharma. And I know your last podcast was on dharma, and it says, money is the root of dharma. You can't be thinking about how to flourish, how to grow, how to help your neighbor, how to get a better education, how to build capacity, which is what you talk about in your last podcast. If you have no money, you're living hand to mouth, and really you're going to have to steal to feed your own kids.
Is that because if someone is operating at that level, they have financial problems and hurdles to overcome, therefore cannot do other things? I mean, what does that mean? A poor man can't be wise?
Not a poor man can't be wise, but a poor man is going to struggle to some degree to be thinking about these concepts. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who's poor is adharmic. But if you want a society that's flourishing, and this is the difference, right? It's a positive definition of flourishing. It's not just I survive and I'm satisfied with my state of being, which is fine. That's perfectly okay. But if you want a society that's flourishing, that's researching into science, that's creating new music, beautiful arts, well, all of these things need money.
And there's no lack of money out there. So I've heard time and time again that if you have a passion, if there's something you want to pursue, then don't let money be an objective. Money will come to you as long as you carry on doing gracious, dharmic, punyam levels of thought to
Yeah.
take you forward. Okay. So no negative connotations. Money's good. Money's a root of dharma.
Well, I mean, let's just pick up on that. So people talk about follow your passion, right? But even that, we could say, actually, let's talk about a lawyer. So one of my friends, Hari, he's a solicitor, and he studied in law school. Then he goes through his training, becomes a solicitor, qualifies, and let's say he becomes a specialist tax lawyer. So 25, 30 years down the line, he's a specialist tax lawyer. He earns loads of money, right? He flies around the world. He has a sense of value. He does good in the world with the money. And he finds now he's really passionate about tax law. Well, nobody's born passionate about tax law. But what he's done is he's found something that creates value, and that he's pursued it. He's been disciplined. And now he has something that he feels passionate about that he can do good things with.
Yeah.
Right? He's contributing to society. So yes, follow your passion, but there has to be a sort of a discipline, a rigor, a commitment to something bigger than this is my passion.
Yeah. So that's removing some of those selfish aspects. So get rich, yes, but not just for yourself. Bring yourself up, bring people up around you, and contribute back to society. Where do you think the term charity comes from then? Just in a financial perspective, you see ultra rich people that start donating to charity. Where does that come from? Is that a sense of guilt? I have too much money, therefore must give some of it away.
Maybe some of it, certainly. I think, this is from reading books and talking to people who are wealthy. I think that there comes a point of realization, and this is from what I've observed. I don't know this for sure. There comes a point of realization that, look, I'm rich. I have a lovely house, a lovely family. I have a lovely car. I have lovely clothes. I'm very satisfied with what I eat. I get to go on holiday. But what now? And what seems to matter to people at a personal level, even ignoring the thinking beyond oneself, is this idea of legacy. And that seems to be a massive driving force. I mean, let's look at some of the richest people on the planet. It's called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, it's the largest foundation on the planet, something like $50 billion in assets under
Yeah.
management, right?
Yeah. It's not Bill wants to give away all his wealth anonymously foundation.
Yeah, I mean, technically he could just solve poverty tomorrow, but that's not.
Maybe, but poverty is a bit more
Sure,
complicated.
sure. But he could certainly, if he spent the money today, as in literally went and whatever it takes to feed and clothe and whatever people that are poor,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be sustainable, because tomorrow or next year or next decade or next century, that wealth will run out. Whereas putting
Yeah.
it into a foundation of some type extends the value of where that money can go, or rather what can be done with it beyond himself. Because when he dies, that foundation continues.
Well, there's two sides of it. I mean, it is called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so he does want his name, he wants his legacy to live on through this, and that's a part of a driver. It's a perfectly normal driver of doing good work. And the other side, which I think you're kind of pointing to, is what is the impact of charity, and how do we make charity sustainable? And this is a deeper question. So it's something that my economics teacher first sparked in me. He had a special interest in developmental economics. And one of the stories that has stuck with me is this idea of a village that he gave. So he said, look, you're in an African village and they've just suffered a famine. Now, I don't know why it's always an African village. I mean,
Terrible.
it can be anywhere,
The colonial,
South America,
yeah,
India.
elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's a poor village.
It's a poor village. And you give it some money and you give it some grain and you fed the people. Great. Now remember, we're studying economics. So there's market forces, there's supply and demand and innovation and industrialization and so on. So you give it grain and the people are fed. And this is fantastic. You've stopped them from starving. But if they're still dependent on your grain in 3 years, 5 years time, something bad has gone wrong. Something horrendous has gone wrong. And really, a more sustainable form of charity is one that enables people, enables the industry, enables infrastructure, enables education, so that in 5 years' time, the people in these places that need help are educated, can innovate, can apply for jobs, have access to internet, roads, cars, Wi-Fi, all of these things. And how do we do that is a really important question, and it's one that's now being focused on, I think, very heavily, and has been thought about and debated in the past decade. And I think it's a fantastic way to start approaching charity.
Is that similar to you can feed a man with fish, but rather you taught him how to fish? I totally screwed that up. But you know what I'm saying, right? Instead of just giving your money to someone, it's better to maybe invest in infrastructure, schools, hospitals, those kind of things, to bring that society up so that they can fend for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And we can simplify this idea even further. And this is something I've learned through my exposure to VM, actually, is that VM's fantastic as this sort of family atmosphere, and there's a sort of environment of constant mentorship. Someone will be mentoring you, you're mentoring other people. Sometimes they know something you don't, so they'll teach you. But inbuilt in that idea of mentorship is, I want to be in a position where this person no longer needs me in half a year to do whatever task it is that I'm mentoring. So the idea of leadership then is to remove yourself from the situation.
Yeah, you don't want to create dependencies.
Precisely, which is so opposite to many common ideas of leadership or charity or anything like that. It's sort of a contrarian view of these things.
So just you sparked an idea in my mind there about some of these large charities, especially in the West, perhaps ones that manage to have a shop on every high street. What's going on there? I don't understand it at all. But surely, if you've got a shop on every high street, you kind of got enough money to start doing something with some of that wealth to start solving problems. Does the money ever get to? There was one story I remember. I think. Don't sue me. It was Kim Kardashian that launched a charity or something, but only 10% of the funds got to the end result. 90% was swallowed up in admin and fees and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's some charities out there that are doing some fantastic work, and it's unfair to group them all into a
Yeah,
pot.
sure.
But we can look at them systematically, and we can be fair about this. So let's take an adage, and the adage is this: is that a system is designed to preserve itself.
Yeah, wow.
I'm going to let your viewers think about that one for a moment.
You've got me puzzled. Say it again.
A system is designed or will evolve to preserve itself.
Like Agent Smith.
Almost, right? So let's say I design a company. It's called Ravi Lakhani Limited. Now, if this company is around in 100 years, it means something in that company has allowed that company to survive for 100 years.
Yeah.
Seems really basic, right? And the same is true of charities. So the role of a charity or any sort of institution to some degree is I want to persist, right? I want to continue. Now let's compare that to the idea we just had of actual leadership, actual charity, where my purpose is to dissolve myself in this scenario. I want you to be able to do everything. In fact, I want you to be able to do everything better than I can do it. So there's something that just doesn't sit right. And this is a principle of alignment, which is a sort of key principle of private equity, is that a charity, what they're trying to do is, yes, they're trying to do good, but they're also trying to preserve themselves. So that's their intention. And what's the receivership doing? Well, they probably want to get out of the situation they're in and they want to flourish. And what's the giver doing? Well, they want to give some money and they want to help the other person flourish. So actually, there's three different ideas of what needs to be going on.
Yeah.
And that's where you get sort of mistakes happening.
So there's a lot going on there, and we're going to have to unpick some of it because you've definitely confused me. Okay, look, let's back up a little bit. We were talking about wealth and money and gold and things like that. Can you help me at least understand where money is backed by something? So whether it was on a movie or somewhere else, but on the United States dollar, it says something to the words of the Bank of America owes you or celebrates this amount of money. I don't have any money on me. I'm trying to look for a £10 note where it says, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of something.
Yes.
So cash is what? Just an IOU?
Cash right now very much is an IOU. So it used to be pinned to gold.
It's not
So
anymore?
it's not anymore. It was
Probably
unpinned.
Bitcoin or something.
No, it's unpinned, and then now it's regulated by sort of centralized institutions. And I mean, there's pros and cons of this, and this is sort of deep, dark rabbit hole
Yeah.
that I don't particularly want to go down. But it used to be pinned, and now it's not. And now it's really controlled by more sort of market forces. So what's the supply of money and what's the demand for money? And a good example of this is the US dollar. If you want to buy stuff from the US, you need Sumit Sharma needs US dollars.
Yeah.
So Sumit Sharma is going to be in the market trying to buy US dollars. So the demand for US dollars goes higher.
Yeah. So supply and demand of money.
Yeah.
And is that how people benefit from things like Forex?
Precisely. Yeah.
Is
They're
that
just
not
sort of,
dangerous then? Where if I could line up 10 of my friends to say, right, today we're all going to buy dollars. And because we do so, I mean, 10 is probably not enough, but extrapolate that further, we then sway the market.
yes. I mean, cases of this have happened. It's called market manipulation. It is illegal and can be investigated, can get you
Illegal
put into
where? In the place where that currency is being purchased.
so that if you do that with the US dollar, for example,
Yeah.
That crime falls under the jurisdiction of the US, and they can pursue you
Wow.
for that, regardless
As
of
long
where
as
you
I
are.
can be extradited there or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're falling into a legal
Yeah,
landmine here,
sure.
but yeah, because you're potentially damaging the US economy, right?
Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
For your viewers out there, if you want to sort of dive into an example of this, it's a great YouTube video to watch. Google Flash Trader.
Okay.
It's one guy in a bedroom sort of trading at a really high frequency that caused a stock market crash.
Really? There was a guy in London.
That's the guy.
Oh yeah, they call him the Wolf of Hounslow or something like that, didn't they?
That's the guy.
Wow, yeah. Well, they made a movie on him.
Yeah, and I mean, what he did was not arguably illegal,
But they found a way.
but it's a very grey area,
Yeah,
and so on. And I mean, he earns a decent living now anyway. So
fine. Yeah,
yeah,
look him up. Maybe we'll get him on the show if he's allowed or if we're allowed. We are not your financial advisors. This is not legal advice you're getting on this episode. This is the Vichaar Manthan podcast. We're here to discuss ideas. So we're not telling you to go and do anything, but have fun, man. The way society is now built is we are not locked down to geographical regions. I can speak, communicate, trade with people all over the planet. And I think this pandemic has made us do that a whole lot more. Even in the summer, when we had the Vichaar Manthan Sustainable Narratives Conference, we had speakers from all over the world. So is there then a need for some type of international consistency when it comes to markets and regulations like this? So the example you gave is if we're swaying the market with the US dollar, for example, that would be perhaps a crime in that region. Is there that need? Do we need to have some type of international consistency? Do you think?
The fundamental idea and the short answer here is yes.
Sure.
Absolutely, we need it. But one thing that's really helped me in the world of finance is the idea of Dharma. And the stance on this is you just have to be practical. You have to take into account human tendencies of governments. And the reality is we're not on an even playing field. We don't have international institutions that can do that right now.
Yeah, so like in this country, you've got organizations like the FCA and other regulations that govern within the UK. So those don't exist cross border.
So, I mean, the FCA is a little different in that it came in and part of it came in post-crash. And therefore, there is some form of underlying structure like Basel III that exists that we've agreed.
What's that?
Internationally. So Basel is just a place in Switzerland. And after the banking crash happened, it replaced Basel II. I mean, not very complicated. 3 came after 2. And it was supposed to sort of try and make sure that we don't get another crash. Now, the efficacy of it and how good it is remains open to debate. And it's something I have my own reservations about. But the idea was that banks have to hold more liquidity. They can't just be lending all of their money out and have nothing left in reserve.
Is that what happened in Greece? Is that why Greece constantly needs to be bailed out?
Greece is a little different. So Greece's government debt, it does have some things to do with this in terms of who you can lend to and to what extent you can lend, but it's a little different. So Basel III covers more the sort of investment banking and commercial banking sector.
It's clear I know nothing about all this stuff. So
Yeah.
he agrees. Right. Let's move on. In our Sustainable Narratives conference in the summer, Jamie White, who was a liberal economist, former director of research at the Institute for Economic Affairs, said that efficiency isn't what transformed the world. When referring to Dharmic wealth and wealth creation, it was the explosion of innovation. And so if we want to sustain progress, we need to sustain innovation. So, Ravi, how important do you think innovation is when talking about wealth and sustaining wealth in society today? And what does that even mean?
Yeah. So to me, innovation is the cornerstone. And it's something that I can see us as a society, us as a country, us as a civilization getting very wrong, actually. And the way I look at it is, so a lot of ideas, modern ideas of economics are built on principles from Adam Smith. I mean, they've evolved since then. But the classic example that's given is this needle factory. And I think Jamie talks about it. And basically it's the industrialization of labor, right? So
Right.
if I was drawing out needles, putting holes in them, I'd maybe do 10 a day. If we have a factory where each person does 1, you can do 10,000 a day, right?
That just sounds like efficiency, though.
So the separating out of it is innovation. Now, the moment we have a factory and I'm trying to get that factory more efficient in the layout and the Kaizen's a massive thing now.
Yeah.
That's efficiency. And in there, you're going to encounter marginal gains and the law of diminishing returns. At some point, you're just going to sort of taper off your growth. And at that point, you need innovation. Now, the issue with this is that our education system, our institutions are still built on this idea of efficiency. So our education system is designed to produce efficient workers, not innovative workers, but efficient workers. And this I can see having sort of long-term impacts on the way we approach evolution and change. And there's a reason why the US is seen as the startup capital. There's a reason why Silicon Valley kicked off in the US. It's because there's this fearless, innovative culture that's ingrained.
Yeah.
And I think those countries, those societies that ingrain this will flourish and will do better than others.
And Okay. So I'm just trying to unpick that a little bit. So the reason why such societies develop better, for want of a better phrase, is because they are more innovative than they are efficient, or just that they are more innovative, and maybe efficiency is not as important.
So let's simplify this. So let's talk about Sumit Sharma.
Sure.
Sumit is trying to progress in life and be the best person he can be.
Of course, always.
And what he does is he tries to be more efficient. I mean, I can see you got a bookshelf behind you. So in organizing his bookshelf,
Okay.
and he finds this new method of doing it, and it's 2% more efficient. Fantastic.
Right.
And tomorrow he finds a new way of doing it. It's 1% more efficient. It takes him 5 minutes less. That's totally different to a Sumit who goes, forget books. I'm going to use a Kindle.
Okay.
Right? Which is what you do. That's innovation.
Right.
Can you see the difference?
Sure.
And now you do that with every aspect of your life. And the key premise of this is that we as a society, as a civilization, are tied to how we look at the world now.
I think
And how
in both those examples, whether it's a book or the Kindle, I'm still giving my money to Amazon. Sorry, go on.
This is true. You know, even more of an innovative, you might be go out and talk to people, whatever it is, right? You decide that actually I read books to get knowledge, and the best way to do that now is to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
So you scrap all your books. That's innovation.
Sure.
Right?
So it's actually pivoting around, and yeah, I get it. That's a good one. Maybe someone at home can help us understand more the difference between innovation and efficiency. But we must move on. I know you listened to the last one, so you better be prepared. So let's get into it. The quick fire round. Ravi Lakhani. If you were stranded on an island, what 3 items would you take with you? And why? Your Kindle. First thing comes to mind.
Forget it. Let's say all the food and the water and all this is taken care of, right?
Yeah.
It's a very well stocked desert island.
Innovative island.
Innovative island, absolutely. I think honestly, I'd take an iPod Classic.
Okay.
With so many songs on, and it sounds archaic, and I know there's so many other things out there, but there's this sort of just a fondness within me for the iPod Classic that I had. You know, very robust, very solid.
Yeah, I still have mine. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, iPod Classic, number 1.
iPod Classic, absolutely. I think I would take
for anyone else coming on the VM podcast, you gotta bring the ideas ready. Stranded on an island. I'll shoot myself when someone asks me. Let's move on. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book is Bartimaeus by Jonathan Stroud. It's a fiction book, which many people find surprising about me.
Sure. Why is that your favorite?
Best thing about it, there's a sarcastic demon who's about 3,000, 4,000 years old, totally sarky, and no respect for culture, civilization. And I just love, it's so funny that, and there's this like 12-year-old who's trying to become a politician, like power hungry guy. And this demon's just like, yeah, this is nonsense. London's a crap civilization anyway. It's all going to crumble. I've seen, Prague crumble. I've seen Rome crumble. This one also will crumble. And it's just done. It's so funny. And the dynamic between them is hilarious.
Sure.
And I feel like it just manages to cut to the truth and expand that way of thinking to beyond this. We live in this world.
Sure. So if anyone's interested in that book, we'll put a link in the description below. If you read it, if you find out, let us know what you think. Ravi, what does sustainability mean to you?
So sustainability to me means 2 things. One is an expansion in the timeline and the people that we apply our ideas to. So if this is sustainable, it should be able to maintain beyond my lifetime, 100, 200, 300 years. And I think the longer we stretch that, the closer to the idea of sort of dharma or dharmic we get. And the same for people. So myself and my friends, my family, is it sustainable for the whole of society? Is it sustainable for the whole of humanity? And even stretching it beyond that, is it sustainable for all living creatures? And to me, the moment you stretch these two, you're getting closer to this sort of idea of truth or underlying dharma that Sachin was talking about.
Yeah, that's really well put. I like that. So the expansion of time in your ideas to outlive yourself, and expansion of the reach or the impact that has, so further than yourself, family, friends, and then even it's beautiful, extension to all living being things, all living things, living beings. Yeah, very beautifully put. Thank you. What goes into your perfect breakfast smoothie?
Perfect breakfast smoothie: peanut butter, oats, banana, maybe some vegan chocolate spread if I'm feeling for that extra sugar rush in the morning, and then 2 scoops of chocolate protein powder.
Nice.
That's it. We're done.
Awesome. Awesome. We have to put together a cookbook at some point, the VM podcast breakfast smoothie. Okay, this is something we did before and we're going to do it again. On the VM podcast today, I want you to make a commitment. Something that you can do going forward that makes you that much more sustainable. Something in your life perhaps that you have been meaning to do or you know you should do or haven't done before. How can someone hold you accountable to this?
Okay. So it's something simple that people can hold me accountable for is I want to read a book a week. And that's part of that commitment, of existing within the VM ecosphere, and building capacity, which again, you guys were talking about on your last podcast. And I think for me, to some degree, reading that book a week is really important for me building that capacity.
Brilliant. Reading a book a week. And there is a fantastic way our listeners at home can be reading more books. It's by joining a VM book club. So for anyone listening, anyone interested in trying to read more books, go to vicharmanthan.org, have a look at book clubs and see. I think we've got 5 or 6 book clubs up and down the country now. Many books have been read, many books have been discussed, and that will etch you that much further towards a more sustainable life. What is your favorite quote?
Yeah, so my favorite quote actually comes from Lord of the Rings, which people who know me will be like, yeah, obviously he's going to quote Lord of the
My
Rings.
precious.
It comes from Gandalf, who I think, is very Dharmic. That's probably my personal opinion.
He reminds me of Bisham Padama. Maybe just because he's
A little
old and very
less blind, I'd say.
wise. Okay, sorry.
Uh, but I mean, Frodo's in this sort of deep, dark space. He's like, why does this happen to me? Why do I have to
It's
get the ring?
urban.
It's
Come on.
rubbish.
Lord of the Rings just copied Mahabharat, surely.
And he says, I wish it didn't happen in my time. And Gandalf says, and so do all who live in such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And that to me, when I'm in that, those inner whinging moments where your voice is like, oh, why me? Why do I have to get up? Or why do I have to do this? Well, look, you don't get to decide that, right? You have the capacity, therefore you have the responsibility, as Sachinji was saying, and it comes from, Krishnamurti, as he quoted.
Yeah.
And that to me is a sort of really powerful, life-changing idea, is that you don't get to decide. If you got the capacity, you got to do it.
You got to do it. Take that responsibility. Very nice. Thank you for that. Still, Frodo could be likened to the Urchin, and we should make the adapted version, right? Lord of the Rings, Mahabharat edition.
I'm down. As long as I get second breakfast, I'm down.
Awesome, awesome. Maybe there were more questions in the quickfire round that we didn't answer, but we'll have to come back to you on another episode. Thank you for listeners tuning in at home. This has been the VM podcast. We are not finished yet. I still want to talk about things like cryptocurrency and what that means in the future. So just recently we had a VM fireside with Lay Saga about whether decentralized finance is the future of money. What do you think? What do you make of this whole crypto gig? Do you have Bitcoin?
I personally do not have Bitcoin, and that's intentionally.
Tell us more.
First of all, let me say that fireside was fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean,
great.
I had people on my course in London Business School listening in, and they thought it was massively insightful. And these guys are studying finance.
Brilliant.
I thought that Lee brought up this fundamental question, and until that's answered for me, I think Bitcoin will continue to shake and quiver. And the fundamental question is this: is what is its value? How do you value this thing? And I mean, I do this for my job. We
Yeah.
spoke about this. I value companies. How do you value Bitcoin?
How is it done today? It's worth today £30,000 or $40,000 for one Bitcoin. How is that value brought about today?
So very simply, it's still supply and demand, right? There's
Yeah.
Bitcoin and we mine it.
We were talking about
So
that
there's
earlier. That's the same as
well,
dollars.
no, absolutely not. We'll discuss why. So we mine Bitcoin, and that's the supply, and the demand is how big right now. Why would you buy Bitcoin? Tell me one reason you'd buy Bitcoin.
So it's going up in value.
Tell me another reason.
It's
There you go.
popular,
No,
maybe?
no, yeah, that's your problem, right? That's your problem. So the reason I was buying US dollars earlier is because I want to buy US products,
Sure.
or I want to invest in the US, or I think the US currency is stable.
Hold
Fine.
on. Is that not just casting a shadow on Forex? People in
Absolutely.
Forex buy other currencies because they go up and down in value, and so they want to profit from that change. Surely those principles can be applied to cryptocurrencies.
Well, the way Forex, if you talk to Forex traders, the way they're trying to predict the trends is they're saying, well, this new president is going to tighten up the tax or he's going to increase tariffs on exports. So this is what's going to happen to US trade, and therefore the dollar will do
That's
this.
the same. JP Morgan makes a statement about Bitcoin, or BMW says we're going to now start accepting Bitcoin. The value goes up.
But see how it's pinned to products in the real world.
Okay.
So unless and until Bitcoin is underpinned or pinned to something that's occurring in the real world, other than if we look at it now, Bitcoin is largely bought and sold on emotion. I
Yeah.
think it's going to go up. I think it's going to go down. Why do you think it's going to go up? Because more people want it.
Mm,
That's a circular argument.
okay.
So that's part one, and the other part is, what is Bitcoin backed by?
Nothing. Why
This
is
is
that a
the issue.
problem?
Because the US dollar. Let's just
Again,
talk about
this,
the US.
if the
No, no, no.
US dollar crashes tomorrow, is it backed by something?
Of course, it's backed by something.
What?
So first of all, the Fed can buy back US dollars, so they can create an artificial demand for it.
Sure.
Why would anybody do that with Bitcoin? Nobody has any vested interest, really, other than people who own loads of Bitcoin themselves, of maintaining this currency. Whereas the US needs a functioning economy. It needs a currency that's worth something. It needs to be able to trade on the open markets.
So, okay, just
So there's a fundamental misalignment, isn't there? So with the US dollar, because it's used for things because the US government needs it, the US people need it, people who are trading with the US need it, they need it to fulfill the purpose.
if there were enough people that had Bitcoin and were vested in its, I don't know what the term is here, but in its
Yeah,
use.
sustainability,
Yeah,
upkeep,
if there were enough
value.
people invested in the idea that Bitcoin needs to sustain, then they could create that demand that you talk about.
Potentially, and this is what Lee was pointing at, is that there are people who are trying to do this. The issue now becomes, well, it's no longer decentralized because you had established some form of company or institution that says we'll maintain that Bitcoin around this value, and that's what stablecoin is. So until that fundamental question is answered, Bitcoin remains a very smoky proposition.
Very interesting. I know a friend of mine will definitely disagree with you, but we'll have to talk about that at another time. I've got here on my notes that a capitalist society rewards risk and innovation. Is that good? Is that bad? What does that even mean?
Absolutely. I think this is one of those fundamental principles that we were talking about earlier that people miss and misinterpret when they say wealth is bad. And the common example given is the example of a factory. There's a factory, I work in it, but I only get paid minimum wage. Whereas Sumit, the big rich owner in his big mansion, he takes 90% of the profits. How is that fair? That seems an inherently unfair idea to people. And that's and that's one of the reasons Eric was talking about, that people are angry. Well, let's examine that for a moment. So as a worker, what have I invested? Well, I've invested maybe 2 weeks worth of training. Yeah, I don't know what I do in your factory, Summit. What are we making?
Cars.
Cars. Fine. I got 3 weeks worth of training and I screw on tires, right? Screw on wheel caps.
Sure.
I've invested 3 weeks of my life and I get that job. And if the factory fails, I'll move to another car factory, or I'll get another 3 weeks worth of training and I'll go.
Yeah, so you've gained skill.
I've gained skill, but I've only invested 3 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So my investment, that's what I'm risking if your factory goes down,
Yeah.
and my reward is minimum wage.
Sure.
Whereas what have you risked? Well, you've probably studied some sort of business, or you spent time in business. You started up a business. You've invested your capital. You've bought robots. Or you're renting a factory place,
Rates and health and
or
safety, all the
rates. You've
rigmarole
got a
that goes
business
with it. Yeah.
plan. You've got lending. So if that factory goes down, you're risking far more than I am,
Sure.
and therefore you're entitled to that reward.
I used to work in a company where our CEO came out and openly disclosed his salary, and he explained why he was worth that much money. And it went along the lines of the risk that's he's taking. He's having to go to the board and to other financial lenders to almost promise them a return on their investment. So he was worth the amount of money he was. And it was a very humbling to sort of see that, here you go, here's what I'm worth, and how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it was, to show you that I'm worth this much money. So interesting.
But even then, I mean, there's something really important here, and we spoke about alignment, and people miss this. But now there's an increasing structure coming in where that CEO, after they leave, they have to leave. So normally CEOs also get like a share bonus, right?
Yeah.
They have to leave at least 25% of the shares that they own, or a significant chunk in the company.
Wow.
They cannot take it out. Why do you think that is?
Just
Right?
so that their actions that they're taking, decisions they make, are going to sustain longer than they are in the company. So you don't get shady
Exactly.
business.
Exactly. It's that longer timeline, right? Because as a CEO, I might say, oh, I have to hit 10% growth. I'm going to just whack loads of advertising in, pump up the sales artificially. And then when I leave, I don't care what happens. The company might crash because everybody's bought the product. So now what they've done is they've extended the time that the CEO is invested, the horizon.
Yeah. So even if you're leaving, I mean, that would drive you to better behavior. You don't want to
Exactly.
do anything that's going to tank or do something wrong, because it affects you financially going forward, even when you're not in the company.
So your own behavior is more aligned for the longer term benefit for the company and the people involved in the company. Well, you could say that's a bit more dharmic.
Yeah, that's beneficial to all. I guess you're nullifying some harmful, or at least you're nullifying conflict there. Is that done in a loving manner? I don't know. We'll have to
Yeah.
discuss. Um,
Depends on the CEO.
okay, look, the world of money is not all sunshine and rainbows. People lose out. It affects lives, but it's not all bad, as we've discussed. So, what can you say to the ways in which people react to investments, or at least to mistakes? People make mistakes all the time. So,
Two mistakes.
if someone's I don't know, invested in my car company and it doesn't go well for them, how do you think they should react?
I think this is tough because, as you said, it's people's lives and livelihoods that we're talking about here. I mean, two principles that I've always been taught. So the first one is you have to have alignment and checks and balances for that alignment. So, for example, let's say I invest in Sumit Sharma. Well, Sumit Sharma has to be incentivized into what I want as an investor, right? So Sumit can't be just incentivized on, you run this company for 3 years, I'll give you £500,000. Well, he's only incentivized to run the company then. What else is it? Should be growing or should be in alignment. And generally that's done by skin in the game. So Sumit, let's say I'm putting in £50,000. Well, Sumit, if I'm going to invest in you, you also have to put in 15,000,
Right.
because at least then you're in the same boat as me,
Sure.
right?
At least
So
from
then
a financial perspective.
exactly. So skin in the game, alignment, these sorts of things. The other thing below that is just going back to your fundamental principles and having checks and balances. So I might think this is fantastic, but what I'll do is I'll take it to someone I trust, someone I know will disagree with me, and just check my own instinct. And that's a big part. Is we're talking about finance as if it's all logical, but it's not. We're
Mhm.
human, we're emotional. So you got to check your own instincts and your own sort of biases, and that's a big part of finance.
So, does that mean we should not act upon emotion in a financial?
I mean, there's different schools on this, but if we look at, there's two ways of looking at
So
this. One is,
when that pretty financial trader on Instagram messages you saying, I'm going to give you 5%, 10% profit margins, deposit
yeah.
to this bank.
Well, it depends how pretty she is, to be honest. So. No, absolutely not. I mean, let's just take an approach that we've had during this podcast,
Sure.
and that is that risk is proportional to reward.
Yeah.
So if she comes along and says, "Hey, Summit, I promise you 50% return," I mean, what are you saying now that we've just spoke about that?
I'd want to see where she is in invested in this program,
Yeah.
this whatever it is.
And what about the risk reward side, right? The reward sounds pretty
50%
big.
sounds like too much. This is not sustainable.
So how big is the risk?
Bigger.
Huge,
Yeah, massive.
huge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Huge. So that's why you have your 5% bonds. I mean, not anymore, but you used to get 5% bonds. Well, the risk is really low, but you're getting 5%,
yeah.
right? You want to go higher, you're going to have to take more risk.
Premium bonds, they're zero risk, right?
Yeah, depending, if they're backed by governments, depending which government.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
So there's really interesting. So I went to an investment seminar about 2 years ago, and it was run by Aviva. But if we look at the history of financial markets, so first of all, what happens is Sumit Sharma invests in a fund, and when that fund goes down, Sumit panics and goes, "Hey, get my money out." And when it goes up, Sumit says, "Oh, this is great, put more money in."
Yeah.
And both of these are nonsensical things because they're not based on anything apart from
That seems pretty straight. That seems like the most normal thing to do, right? Though.
So Aviva did a study, and what they found is that over, let's say, 20 years, this is costing investors something like 5% every year, is this emotional reaction to the markets.
Oh wow.
So what they've done, and Aviva have done this, many other companies have got this product, is when the market goes down by 5%, they have a fund that doesn't move.
Okay.
Because they don't want you to jump out of it. They want you to stay because they know it's going to come back. They know the trend. They've done their analysis. They know that. But what happens is it goes down and people leave, and then they miss this upward when it recovers, and then they're like, "Oh, it's going up. Let's buy again." And they buy it at the peak when it's up, and then it comes down and they sell again. And people are missing out. And really, it's this long-termism that's been shown to win. And the reason for this fund is they're smoothing out the ups and downs. Why? To cater for their investors' emotions.
Wow.
And to be a balance to them.
Wow.
So this is the extent to which emotion is impacting financial decision making. That major funds are trying to structure things just to balance that out.
Very good. Can you offer any advice to someone coming out of uni that has dreams to be rich?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely dream.
Is it just that? Is it just a dream? Who doesn't? Who doesn't want to be wealthy?
The question here is not who wants to be wealthy or why or how wealthy. The question here is why.
Why do you want to be wealthy? I want to live in a nice house and have a nice car and be able to go on holiday. Who doesn't want that?
Okay, why?
Because, yeah, good question. I want, I don't know.
See, this is the issue. This is the issue, and the way I've been
That's a
exposed.
mark. I'm going to be careful how I phrase this. I don't totally follow this train of thought, but it is seen as the mark of success, where you
Bingo.
get
Fantastic.
happiness, right? Where if you have wealth, then other problems can be taken care of quite easily. That's surely I'm not the only one that thinks that, and I don't
No,
fully
absolutely.
subscribe to that thought. But no,
Well, the way I was taught to think about it is that, look, if Sumit Sharma doesn't have his own view of success, or the way I was taught, actually, I'll give you the exact quote, is if you don't have your own 5-year plan, then you're part of somebody else's 5-year plan,
yeah,
right? And the question is, why do you want these things? And if it's to be happy, well, then let's start there. What makes you happy? And if the answer is lots of money and Lamborghinis and fast cars, fine, right? But the way, again, I've been taught to check this, and the way to do this is not to overestimate yourself. And I do it. I'm sure everybody's guilty of it. We all suffer from these things, is to have systems that you go to. So for me, that system is 5 whys. And if I don't do it, I've got my sister who will consistently poke me to say, you told me you want to do this thing. And you sit down and you write down, I want to invest in Bitcoin. Why? Because I want to get rich. Why? And you do 5 times.
okay.
And it just adds an extra check. And by the end of that,
You start weeding out thoughts that come from things like ego, thoughts like
exactly.
pride or materialism. Those things start becoming weeded out if you go through 5 whys. I've not heard of that before. That's quite cool. So, listeners at home, if you do want a Lamborghini or lots of money, ask yourself why, and then go through that process 5 times. 5 why process. I'm sure that wasn't something you coined. Where does it come from?
No, honestly, it's come from when I was in a spices business, and you have to, if you make any sort of mistake, any sort of thing, the regulations, they're like, so this label, had, I don't know, whatever it was, like the wrong date or the wrong concentration on why, and that's how you check it, and that's how you make sure it never happens again. And I thought, this is fantastic. I mean, I thought the whole process was really annoying and took hours, but it drilled into me this check and balance. So okay,
You can really dig deep within the mistake per se, or even yourself, Ask yourself the question, why? Why do I want to do this? Why do I want a fast car? So, I mean, okay, fine. You can ask the 5 whys why you want the Lamborghini, but what does that say about when it comes to approaching such tasks? Like when you're trying to figure out what your why is, how do you create some type of discipline within your attitude towards wealth?
Yeah, this is really important, and it's something I've learned through sort of exposure to the old hats in private equity, and what they're teaching me is this idea that if you win, you make loads of money on an investment. Okay, analyze why. If you lose, okay, analyze why. But that reaction of, oh my God, everything's gone wrong, shouldn't come. And the reason is not because we're emotionless, heartless people. The reason is because it's this idea of feedback and refinement of systems, right? It's the same as the scientific method. Well, if you win, you want to know why you won. What is it that you did right so you can do it again?
Yeah.
And if you lost, you want to know why
So that you,
so you don't do it again,
yeah.
right?
Is
Exactly.
there like how is that all sewn together? Is there an overarching methodology there?
Yeah. I mean, if we want to look at the sort of Hindu thought, I mean, we spoke briefly about the root of dharma being artha, so wealth, right? But if we follow that down, there's actually a whole mantra about it, and it says like the root of dharma is artha, and the root of artha or wealth, right, is good governance, good running, good systems, and we can see that we've spoken about it. We looked at it with Bitcoin. And the root of good systems and systems that are applied and executed well, right, is sort of victory over one's senses or victory over one's internal tendencies. So this self-discipline to have a stable state of mind and apply rules and governance and systems in any situation, regardless of whether we won or we lost.
Mm.
And then even further, what's the root of that? Well, the root of that is sort of humility, right? That okay, I won, but I'm not the best investor on the planet. How can I get better?
Yeah.
Okay, I lost, but I'm not the worst investor on the planet. How can I get better?
So
So,
is that mental fortitude?
yeah, you could call it mental fortitude. You could call it sthita prajna. It's talked about in the Gita. What's really interesting is if we go down one more level, it says the root of humility is service of those who are wiser or older than you.
Wow.
so,
Wow.
so so the whole of dharma then, this guy in the Arthashastra, he's arguing that the whole of dharma in society and civilization, a kingship, he's talking about it in an economic sense, is built on this idea that we should serve those who are older and wiser than us and learn and be exposed to them and lose our humility and our ego within that service.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad idea at all. And if you get rich from it, then even better.
And yeah, definitely better, you should be rewarded for doing these
Yeah,
things.
and it's through that humility. It's through you see those memes, right? $550 million, not a Gucci belt in sight. That's why the Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerbergs don't worry too much about what they're wearing or dressed as.
Yeah,
But obviously they've
exactly.
got crazy amounts of wealth that go along with it.
I mean, let's go more fundamental than that. So the most successful hedge fund of all time is called the Medallion Fund.
Okay.
It's shut. You cannot invest in it. External investors, it's just too big. It's got 10 billion, and every investor is part of its own staff, right?
Okay.
To work for this place, you need like 3 PhDs in maths, statistical analysis.
Wow.
The founder of this fund, he uses algorithms, systems, all of these things, and he talks about this in his book of the internal fight where he thought the market was going to go this way, and all of the algorithms and systems that he and his team had built were saying it's going the other way. And sometimes he tried to overrule it initially, and now he's doing it less and less. But you need that internal discipline, right, to trust that system.
Have you've seen the film The Big Short? That
Yes.
guy predicts what's going to happen, and the weak sea level mortgages were packaged up into the aliens. I mean, did that guy have humility? Was he following his Stith Pragna?
well,
Because he was. I mean, it's a true story, right?
yeah, and there's a few people that predicted this crash and made money from it. Now, we're not saying that everybody who does well has all of these qualities. Everybody who's rich is not inherently dharmic.
Right.
But the idea is that, look, money is there and wealth is there, and at the moment the capitalist system is there. And really we can label it as good or bad or unfair or fair, but it's a tool and it works and there's a system and we can understand it. And then we can use it in a dharmic way.
Yeah.
We can interact with it. It's like if you have a hammer, you can hit someone with it. That's probably not very dharmic, right? Or you can use it to put up a bookshelf or something. And that's probably a bit more dharmic. So it's a tool, and it depends on how you use it.
Yeah, yeah. So money is that tool, and what you do with it.
Yeah. And if it's causing you to have this unstable, angry, sad state of mind, then you're probably not using it right.
So that says a lot then. So I mean, you look at Hollywood and you see the typical protagonist that's got lots of money but has a wealth of other problems, right? And I was discussing with my family earlier. There's no one that doesn't have problems, um, and I don't think money can solve them all for you, or at least wealth can't be. But it's that humility in wealth, and I say that both positively and negatively, that will make you a better person, right? And so long as you're acting in a loving and compassionate manner, then you are, I don't know, better for it.
Yeah. Wealth, we know money does not make you a good person. And also, money doesn't exist in its own bubble. It's part of the reality of everyday life.
Yeah. So money itself isn't evil. It doesn't have to be, but what you choose.
Money is not evil. It's just the people.
There are schools of thought out there that talk about the capitalist society in which we live in and how people with money are able to swing or sway votes. So is voting with your money bad, good, frowned upon? What do you think?
So here we're kind of tipping into sort of political philosophy. And I mean, there's a reason that liberal democracies are around, and they seem to have won, at least for the time now. And that's everybody seems invested in them, and there's some form of check and balance to this guy or girl, I guess, who is hungry for power and wants to take over. But really, this democratic system runs alongside the capital society that we live in. When we see people on Instagram saying Apple uses factories in China, or some other brand uses factories in China, or Beyonce, all of these things, they've come up in the last 2 months. And yet we continue to buy their products.
Yeah.
Well, there's a cognitive dissonance there, right? And it's not just that we turn up every 4 years and we vote, but it's also every time we spend our money, what we're doing is remember, it's a risk and reward. So I mean, I'm going to use the example of Apple, but they've taken the risk of putting their factory in China, and their reward generally is that they get to save money, and also customers will carry on buying them. But if they take the risk that we'll put it in China, and their reward is, well, less customers buy it, well, they'll stop doing it. They're not a silly company.
Yeah. So Apple's the easy example there. Tesla, they're moving to India. That was
Yeah.
interesting because they're going there to get customers first, right? You'll find the rich, wealthy millionaires in Mumbai that will buy Teslas quite easily if they haven't already. But then they're also going to go and try and get their workforce out of India. Now, India's up and coming and a lot more wise. I don't think it will let a company like Tesla exploit their workforce. So that could be a very interesting time for a company like Tesla. For what will Elon Musk do? If for sure he'll get his workforce cheaper, but that's got to be done in a compassionate manner, so long as it's beneficial to that society.
I mean, I believe on this particular one that there are caveats in that sort of the chief engineer of his factory has to be Indian and so on and so forth. So that training, that learning, that innovation is not lost and isn't brain drained out of India.
Mm.
So there are caveats, but really key is sort of we have to understand that every time we spend money, that is a vote to that company,
Yeah.
to the behavior of that company.
So we have that power then. So I think if we circle back down to that
Hmm.
Apple example you gave, if you don't believe that Apple are following heat, meet, breathe, if they're acting in a dharmic way, yet you continue to buy the latest iPhone, then that's a bit hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean, we can go into specifics here, and I think next week you're interviewing one of my friends, and she works for a massive company, right? And one of the surprising things that she told me is that this company no longer owns any meat lines.
Oh yeah, I do know about
None.
this.
And I was just thinking, look, 10 years ago, if I was having a conversation about veganism or vegetarianism with someone, and one of my, let's say, arguments was, well, you're supporting the meat industry. They'll be like, well, look, loads of people buy cows. What difference is one person going to make?
Mm,
And yet, first of all, one of the biggest companies on the planet has sold off all of their meat lines.
mm.
When I was, part of the spices business and I went to a food expo, the number of new startups that were no meat, meat free, was surreal. And the biggest thing I can say to you is that every single meat manufacturer in the UK right now has a meat free line.
Wow. It's a sign of the times. Pretty
Absolutely.
interesting. Also, Sachinji, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. When he bought one of his cars, he paid extra to get the leathers taken out. That's what it takes, right? To be that humble. And I guess there he's valued that, whatever you want to call it, vegetarianism, veganism, sustainable approach more than the financial cost of owning that car.
Sure, but he's signaling to the market, right? If
Yeah,
enough people do that, that car manufacturer will just go, okay, well, our default option is now non-leather,
yeah.
and if you want to pay for leather, you pay more.
Still an Audi though. I mean, he should have got a BMW, but that's a separate conversation. Um, in our Sustainable Narratives conference that happened last summer, we had Eric Lonergan, who is an author and macro hedge fund manager and economist, talked about sovereign wealth. Can you help us understand that a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea. So what he was saying was that we've seen unprecedented growth really in the West in the past decade, perhaps even in the last 50 years. There is a section of society that feels left out of that. And therefore, they feel very angry. And this anger is what we're seeing manifested in various social movements and protests that are going on around the world. And his proposed solution, or one of his proposed solution for this, was a sovereign wealth fund. And the idea, it seems, is that there should be either part of taxes or some section of money should be put aside, and the people's money is paid into this, and it's managed by professional wealth managers, and it grows, and you get a part of it. So Sumit Sharma's money is now part of a wealth fund, and it's growing with that. So you get to take part in the growth of the nation, right, and the flourishing of the nation.
Is that similar to a pension?
Almost similar to a pension. I mean, a pension can choose. What he's saying is that it should be national and everybody should have access to it.
But then
It's
only
a step,
only mature markets could do something like that.
possibly.
If you went to a third world country where their financial rigor isn't so great, would that sovereign fund work?
I mean, yeah, I think that's a slightly separate discussion in terms of their governance systems and the robustness to do that effectively. I
Right.
mean, they could certainly do it. How effective it would be an interesting conversation. And the counter argument that Jamie gave on that panel was, why would I trust someone in government with my money?
Yeah, that's true.
What's to say they can manage it better than me or better than a private wealth manager who is aligned and incentivized to make me money, right? Now, these are, again, really fundamental questions that need answering. I think the idea is sound that people should have a part and parcel of their own growth. And what I like about Eric's idea is that he is not saying you get a piece of the pie, full stop.
Mm.
You get a piece of the pie, but you've risked some of your own money, right? You've put either your tax money in, or you can choose to buy in, so that risk and reward is preserved. The question I would have is let's look at the guys at the top. Who is managing this, and what are their incentives? And the issue here becomes, well, look, you're now in the financial industry, and the financial industry is a market. And if you want the best wealth managers, you have to pay them the best money,
Mm.
right? And is it fair if the government is using tax money to pay these fund managers? Would we be happy with that? And if we're not paying them, what caliber of wealth managers are we getting?
Yeah.
You know, are we getting government, individuals who perhaps don't know what they're doing as effectively, who have different purposes and different alignments, you know? And why would I, let's say I'm in the private equity industry, trust the government to invest my own money when this is literally what I do for my day job?
Yeah.
That's not fair, is it? So there are certain key concerns that need to be addressed for this. And I think we can go back to, actually, perhaps it's more important that we have a financially literate population, that financial education becomes more robust from the ground upwards.
How do we do that? How do we become more financially literate?
Simple things like teaching about how to do your taxes in school.
But
You know,
I mean, the
having these
national curriculum has been stagnant for how long? It doesn't teach things like this.
precisely, yeah. So perhaps we should. What investment is? What are the different asset classes you can invest in? And so far we've shied away from it, but that's the reality of life. Is that unless we have a more educated population, people are going to be left out.
Are there schools, countries, places that are? How do you measure financial literacy?
It's a great question. I don't know. I guess you could even do it through simple concepts of, do you understand what profit is? I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but Sumit Sharma, what is profit?
It is the money left over once you've paid off what you need to pay. I did AS level accounts, so
Oh, you did? Okay. Sure. But what's the difference between gross profit and net profit?
minus tax and all your other deductibles.
Okay, fine. So but how many people can answer this? How many people are comfortable with these things? And yet what we're trying to do is preach a sort of environment of innovation and startup
Mm,
culture and, go make your own company. Yeah, sure, go make your own company, but you have to understand the basics of finance first.
yeah, that's a fair point. Um,
So if we as a nation want to have a generation of innovators and startups, and then at some point we have to facilitate that.
so we have to encourage innovation, make everyone more financially literate, and provide a system that is beneficial for all, uh, where we are vested in its growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the plus side, look, you can. I've seen some startups. I've had a chat with some people. They don't know anything about finance, and they have a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
And what they do is they bring on financial experts, and there's no shortage of money for good ideas. But that's a decision we have to make.
Yeah.
Uh,
So it's important to invest in ideas. I would definitely say, after listening and speaking to you, Ravi, that it's important to be financially literate, understand what wealth even is. Do you have a call to action for our listeners at home? What can they start doing?
Yeah. My call to action is really simple and twofold. Number one is become financially literate yourselves. And I don't mean go on Instagram and listen to these people. I mean, the way I look at it is only really listen to people that have been through ups and downs. If somebody comes to you and says, I've never lost a cricket game, you don't want to learn cricket from them, right? Everybody who's got to the top has lost.
Yeah.
They've lost badly. They've missed catches, whatever it is. The same is true in finance, right? You need to listen to people who've been through ups and downs, listen to the people who are at the top, and see what they're saying. And the second bit is that be patient and pay attention to where you're putting your money, right? And this is true of all investments, because we see that people, okay, well, we're putting it in Bitcoin or whatever it is. But if you paid attention, I mean, most of our listeners will know, how much money do you spend on Amazon a month?
God, yeah, I don't know. There's lots of apps now that you can track what your Uber balance is and what your Amazon Prime balance is.
Exactly. So all of these financial things, I think, you can overcomplicate them, but really, if you're in doubt, stick to your fundamentals, simplify it. And if they don't make sense, then be willing to walk away.
Brilliant. I think that's a good place to wrap up this episode on exploring dharmic wealth. Are you acting in a manner financially that is beneficial to all? If you are, is it nullifying harm and conflict? And are you acting in a compassionate manner? Thank you, Ravi, for coming onto the VM podcast. For everyone at home, please let us know what you thought. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, do email in, do contact us, do let us know what else you want to talk about. It's my great privilege to be hosting this for you, and I look forward to bringing more dharmic concepts to your ears in another episode of the VM podcast. Namaste.